Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Toronto-based jazz pianist Jeremy Ledbetter. We caught up with him to talk about his new 2024 CD with his trio called Gravity and his life in music. Originally trained as a classical pianist, he studied jazz performance in Toronto before embarking on over a decade abroad, during which time he worked closely with some of the most prominent recording artists in Trinidad, Cuba, Brazil, and Venezuela. We get into his full story and so much more. Enjoy.
Well, hey, man, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. I appreciate it.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me.
Yep, absolutely. So before we get into Gravity with your trio, I want to know, looking at the calendar 4 years ago, this pandemic began and really threw everybody into a tailspin. And I'm curious how you survived the pandemic and how it subsequently changed you.
Right. Well, I mean, certainly, I'd say it's probably a common answer among musicians and artists. It really, brought things into focus, in terms of making sure that we are, really sort of reminded me of how important what we do is to ourselves and to everyone, else. And I was really reminded of how important the idea of live music and live performance, when it was taken away, it was a big reminder of how important that is. That's that community aspect of us musicians being able to get together in the same room and make music and, that kind of thing. So it's certainly, I don't think I'm doing a good job of wording this, but it definitely reminded me of how, not to take these things for granted. Not to take what we do for granted and the ability to do what we do. So in terms of how I survived it, the same as everyone else. We, just doing what we could. A lot of live stream shows, a lot of performances for, playing a concert for a phone. We did some quote unquote virtual touring where we created video performances and sent them to jazz festivals for them to stream on their websites, that kind of thing. So, we stayed busy for sure. I would say it was not a dull time. If that makes sense. Yeah. But
right
long story short, we just kept doing what we do.
Yeah, no, I dig it. So was this album an outgrowth of living through that time, or talk to me a little bit about the artistic forces that went into this album?
No, I wouldn't say this is connected to the pandemic. In fact, during the pandemic, I went through a period where I found it very difficult to compose because everything that was coming out of me sounded kind of dreary and melancholy and sad, like a rainy day. So I had to actually wait until the pandemic was over to write a bunch of this music, to have a different emotional kind of vibe to it. So creatively, I guess that's not entirely true. I started writing the music for this album soon after we recorded our debut album in 2018, and it's been a process of sort of really exploring the trio format and really digging deep down into what we do and the way we work together and seeing what kind of things we can come up with that feel new and exciting in the, within the context of contemporary jazz or whatever you want to call it. So, but this album is really all about, the three of us and the way that we interact. And so I named the album Gravity. That sort of plays off the idea of there being a sort of like an unseen force that is holding the three of us together, like the way gravity works, I suppose. That there's something that's connecting us that can't be seen, but we can feel it when we play, and hopefully our listeners, our audience, can sense it or feel it as well when they're watching us or listening to us.
Talk a little bit about how this journey into the music began for you. How did you get into the piano and more specifically the world of jazz?
I've played piano my whole life. Grew up classically trained from a very young age. Didn't really come across jazz until later in my late teens, I suppose. And I've just sort of always gravitated towards jazz. I think mainly because I think the classical thing. I mean, jazz. I've always sort of gravitated towards jazz because I find that for me the most interesting and exciting and sort of like cutting edge version of any kind of music, any genre of music is where that music intersects with jazz. So I have spent a lot of time traveling around the world and researching and learning to play a lot of different kinds of music. And I think, when you combine those kinds of music with jazz, that's when they really come to life. There's so much more opportunity for exploration and improvisation and expression. So it was like jazz was sort of like something that had all the virtuosity of the classical music that I had grown up playing, but so much more room for individual expression. So that I think that's what drew me in about jazz. And then just seeing that, jazz more than a genre is really more of an aesthetic or an approach that you can apply to any kind of music, which is, I think, why jazz has become so universal, and it's played literally in every country all around the world.
So after you discovered jazz, what was the first live jazz show that you saw that blew you away?
Good question. Wow. I got to think about that for a minute. Trying to choose one. Geez, there are so many. But I think, I guess probably the first one was when I was first year university and I was studying jazz at York University up here in Canada, and Oscar Peterson came and did a master class for the jazz students there. And so it wasn't even a performance per se. It was just Oscar, just a master class, but that changed my life for good. Just getting to see him, just being in the room with him, and hearing the way he talks about music and the way that the way it works, and how his approach to playing this music, and that was huge for me. I think I'd have to point to that.
Yeah, no, I would imagine so. So what is it about being a professional musician that you look forward to the most? What do you like the best about it?
Wow. Well, getting to do something I love for a living, certainly, the fact that I get to wake up every day and go and do something that I genuinely love, that, that I might be doing anyway, so I think that's invaluable. And, in terms of what I enjoy the most about it, it's the moments on stage performing live, with my trio, or with, I'm also very fortunate to get to play with a number of other projects that are all, I consider them the artists in whose bands I play. A lot of them I consider to be my greatest influences and my biggest sort of guides in this thing, and so they're all projects that I respect immensely and feel very fortunate to get to be a part of. What was the beginning of that question?
You got it.
So those moments, my favorite part is just being on stage with, especially in these situations that I'm very lucky to find myself, where I feel like I'm surrounded by musicians that are, some of the most incredible musicians I've ever met, and I'm being pushed, and we're pushing each other, and to me, there are moments on stage where I feel like I'm just sort of, like I'm not even really doing much of anything, like I'm just on a roller coaster holding on and going, wee,
Yeah.
So that's my favorite.
Yeah, and you've been around a lot of people. You played on a lot of stages with a lot of musicians. What do you take from, even with Oscar, what do you take from being around, veterans and legends and luminaries that you in turn try to teach younger players?
That I in turn try to teach younger players?
Yeah. Do you ever try to, what do you try to impart on them about the...
There are a lot. There are a lot of things, but I guess one of the biggest things for me is that just to try and, especially in the jazz world, there's a lot of theory. We get bombarded with a lot of theory, and there's a lot of sort of like, the mathematics of it all can get very heavy, and it's necessary to understand all that stuff and to learn all of that stuff. But I think it's also very necessary to get to a place where you're not burdened by it and you're freed. You can sort of free yourself from the constant thinking about theory while you're playing. So I think one of the things that I try to remind my students is to just remember that you're playing music, and music is about expressing emotions and telling stories. And so to just remember that, especially in the jazz world, to play with emotion and passion and to really prioritize the musicality of what you're doing as opposed to the nuts and bolts, the mathematics of it. And I think most of the great, the people that I would consider great jazz musicians that I've come across and had conversations with, it always sort of comes back to some variation of that. I think most of the great musicians out there tend to gravitate towards an idea of like, be true to yourself and express something and say something genuine with your voice, as opposed to, like tighten up that 16th note lick.
Yeah, I get it, totally. So, the one thing about the pandemic was that it really did get in the way of a lot of students that were pursuing, and people that lived in big cities had to move away. And I know the dust is kind of settled, so to speak, but what's your take on the strength of jazz right now in 2024?
The strength of jazz right now in 2024?
Yeah.
I think jazz is making a comeback. I don't know if a comeback is the right word, but I think jazz is getting its vibe back. I think there are a lot of really exciting, especially now at this time. I think it's a really exciting time for jazz. I think that the musician, like jazz, there are so many incredibly exciting projects that are being created, and there's so much great music being made by young artists in the jazz world now. There's like a real youth movement in jazz, and I think the audiences are also getting younger, and we're sort of transitioning from, at least in the part, I guess I'm partly speaking about the place where I live, but also the jazz, scene in general. I think there's a real sort of a youth movement underfoot. The audience is getting younger, the music's getting revitalized, and we're sort of moving in an exciting new direction where we're getting away from jazz being a bit of a in the mainstream anyway. We're moving away from jazz being so stuck in traditional form, and I don't know if that's what I'm trying to say, but I feel like I feel like it's getting younger and hipper and more exciting. And there's a lot of groups that I could point to. I won't bother like naming with the list, but there's a lot of groups I could point to that are like helping to make that happen. And it's a lot of this music that I'm referring to maybe doesn't even get categorized as jazz, but that's what it is. That's what's happening, I think. So I'm very encouraged by the way jazz is heading. I feel like it's jazz is a music that is supposed to be constantly changing and keeping up with the times. And I think we were in danger of it getting stuck in the past a little bit too much for a little while there. But I feel like it's on a good track now. So I'm optimistic.
So, yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. If you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see a dream jazz show anywhere, where are you going?
Whew, man, a dream jazz show. Anywhere, anytime?
Yep.
Wow. I'd go see the quintet at Massey Hall, if I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I heard that it wasn't well populated at that show because there was a big boxing match going on at the time.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? All of the subtext of history.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So see, I'm definitely going back to that show because I can actually get a ticket.
That's what I'm talking about. That's the key right
and
there.
as a Toronto guy, I've got to choose the Massey Hall, the famous local jazz concert.
For sure. So Jeremy,
Yeah.
everyone out there has a perception of you: family, friends, fans, students. But you run the show.
Mm-hmm.
What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Wow. I'm just a pianist, composer who's just trying to get better, and I'm trying to be the best I can be at speaking with my voice through my instrument. That's I think who I am. I would consider myself as a musician who's really dedicated to his craft and is dedicated to the idea of refining the way I speak with my voice through my instrument. I guess I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but maybe that makes sense.
No, you're good.
Clean it up a little bit.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good.
You know?
So,
yeah, it's an ongoing process. It's an endless process, right? As we just try to get. That's another thing I tell my students is like try to find. It's all about finding your voice. So I feel like you can continually refine the way that you focus and refine and render your voice.
Perfect. Well
Go ahead,
said. Yeah, no, good. Gravity is the new album. Anybody that wants to get this album in earnest, in the right format, or see you live, any of the good business, where do they go?
Sorry, you broke up a little bit there. Can you repeat that?
I was going to say Gravity is the brand new album. If anybody wants to pick that up, find out about live shows, any of the good business about your world, where can they go?
JeremyLedbetter.com has everything. You can pre-order the new album. It's available for pre-order now in any format you like, and all the information about our upcoming shows, our previous music, everything I'm up to, it's all in one place right there, JeremyLedbetter.com.
One-stop shop. I love it. Jeremy, thank you, sir. Thank you for your story. Thank you for taking some time out. Best of luck. I appreciate it.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening and tuning into another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in Toronto, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Jeremy for his time, story, and energy. If you want to hear more Neon Jazz interviews, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.